All right, welcome back to the True Detectives podcast, everyone. You know, we always dive into some pretty crazy stories here, but this week's investigation, well, this one's set against the backdrop of the high fashion world.
Oh, yeah. Think shimmering lights.
And, yeah, killer outfits,
Absolutely.
but also some seriously dark secrets lurking beneath all the glamour, you know? So we're going to try and figure out what we can from this totally unexpected story. Don't forget to rate and follow us so you don't miss out on more true crime and detective stories in the future. Now, let's get into it.
So today, we're stepping behind the scenes of those like super exclusive runway shows, right? We're talking about the ones you see in magazines. The stuff you shared with us, it painted a picture of what seemed like pretty avant-garde theatrics at first.
Yeah.
But then it takes a turn, you know? It quickly becomes clear that there's this disturbing pattern of deaths happening.
It's really unsettling. And at the center of it all, we've got Detective Maya Rossi. Just picture this. A tough, street-smart detective suddenly thrown into this world of high fashion.
Totally out of her element.
Right. She's got to track down this killer who the media's already given this catchy name, the Couture Killer. Now, you gave us some really vivid details. Those models posed on the catwalk almost like they were frozen in time.
Yeah.
And then a single crimson rose falling, not like it was part of the show, but more like a symbolic drop of blood. And this wasn't just some isolated incident. This was the third time something like this had happened. What was it about those initial reports that really grabbed your attention?
Well, I think what's so fascinating here is that immediate break from what you expect at a runway show, right? Like you go to these things expecting the unexpected, sure, but it's all very carefully curated. These incidents, they kind of ripped through that carefully constructed reality in a way that was really unsettling. And the images you mentioned, the posed models, that blood red rose, it's all so deliberately disturbing. It makes you realize there's something really sinister going on beneath the surface.
It's like a warning, almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get down to the core of this investigation. Our mission, basically, is to try to get inside the head of this killer, to understand what drove them and how they were able to operate within this very specific, very high-stakes world of fashion. We've got to look at the confusion that followed those first deaths. Not just from the public, but from the police too, right? How do you even approach a case like this when it's all happening in such a closed-off, image-conscious environment? And what was it about Detective Rossi's approach, her decision to immerse herself in that world, that made such a difference?
You're hitting on a really crucial point here. The fashion world, it operates on this whole other level with its own unique set of rules and appearances. So for someone from the outside, even a seasoned detective like Rossi, to really get a grasp of what's going on, they had to completely shift their perspective. That initial confusion the police faced probably came from trying to apply their normal investigative methods to a situation that was anything but normal. Rossi's choice to immerse herself, it wasn't just about gathering intel. It was about understanding the subtleties of this culture, you know, the unspoken power dynamics, the values, the things that made people in that world tick, and the things that made them vulnerable.
It's almost like she had to learn a whole new language, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of those initial crime scenes, those runway shows, they're so carefully constructed. I mean, every detail is meticulously planned to create a certain effect.
Like they're creating a fantasy.
Right, a fantasy, an illusion. And then you consider the victims. They were all part of that inner circle, right? Models, designers. It just screams that this wasn't some random act. This felt very targeted, deliberate. What does that tell you about the killer and their motives?
It definitely points to someone with a strong connection to this world. Someone who knows its ins and outs, its key players. The fact that the victims were all insiders suggests the motive was rooted in the industry itself, right? Like maybe it was jealousy, revenge, or even some kind of twisted social commentary. Detective Rossi's early assessment that this wasn't about a love of fashion, but about control, about using the runway as a stage for their own twisted performance, that was really insightful. It changed the whole game. Instead of looking for your typical motives, she starts considering the power dynamics at play. It's a completely different angle.
And you see that contrast so clearly with her partner, Ben. He's completely out of his depth in this world of high heels and homicide. It really shows you just how unusual this case was.
Yeah, poor Ben.
Rossi couldn't just rely on standard procedure. She had to adapt. She had to learn the rules of this new game and understand a world that was totally alien to her.
And it's interesting how Ben's discomfort almost acts as a narrative device, doesn't it? It highlights the unique challenges of this investigation.
Definitely.
It shows how Rossi really had to think outside the box.
Totally. And then there's Rossi's decision to go undercover, right? She dishes her usual clothes, puts on some designer outfits, and dives headfirst into that world.
Right, she goes full method acting on this one.
It was a risky move, putting herself in a vulnerable position like that, but it also gave her access to a perspective that an outsider would never have had. The whole investigation sounds like it was a constant balancing act. You've got your usual suspects, of course, whispers, jealousy, maybe even some scorned lovers in the mix. But you pointed out that a lot of their alibis were pretty weak, like flimsy chiffon, as the source material put it. That implies a certain level of cunning, a meticulousness that explains why there was so little physical evidence at the scenes. What do you think that lack of evidence tells us about the killer?
Well, when you don't have much physical evidence, it usually means you're dealing with a killer who's very careful, very deliberate. They know how to cover their tracks. And when you consider those weak alibis, it makes you think about the culture of that world, right? Appearances are everything. Concrete details, maybe not so much. It's something a smart killer could definitely exploit.
Right, they knew how to play the game.
Absolutely. And then you have that turning point in the investigation. During a show for this up-and-coming designer, Rossi's instincts kick in, and she spots someone who just doesn't belong. It's an outsider backstage, someone with a janitor's pass, surrounded by all this glamour, a real fish out of water.
Exactly. And that observation turns out to be the key that unlocks the whole case. Why do you think that detail was so crucial?
It really shows the power of Rossi's immersive approach. Because she'd spent so much time observing the usual backstage chaos, she could immediately tell that this person was out of place. They didn't belong in that specific context. It's a testament to her sharp observation skills. She could see past the surface and pick out those little details that didn't add up.
And the chase that follows sounds like something straight out of a thriller, through the maze of corridors backstage into these dark, abandoned storage rooms. And the final confrontation, it takes place among all these mannequins with their blank plastic stares. It really adds to the unsettling feeling of the whole case.
Oh, for sure. The setting of that confrontation is incredibly symbolic. Mannequins, they represent this idealized, unattainable form of beauty, and they become these silent witnesses to a crime that's driven by the very pressures that create that idealization. The labyrinth theme backstage and those empty storage rooms, they create this sense of claustrophobia, of hidden truths. It's a stark contrast to the spectacle of the runway. Like there's this whole other world going on behind the scenes.
It's like there's this undercurrent of darkness running beneath the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we find out who the killer is. It's not who you'd expect, right? It's this overlooked intern, not some powerful figure in the fashion world. And the motive, that feeling of invisibility, that desperate need to be seen, even if it means resorting to violence. They never notice me, she said. It's chilling. It really makes you think about the superficiality and the potential for darkness that exists in a world like that.
Totally. The killer's motive really exposes the dark side of an environment where outward appearances and status mean everything.
Huh.
When you've got that kind of intense competition, that constant struggle for recognition, it can lead to some deep feelings of inadequacy. Like
Yeah.
you're invisible, you don't matter. And when that desire to be seen gets twisted by resentment and despair, it can manifest in some really destructive ways, like we see here.
And it's interesting how the story plays out after the arrest. The killer becomes this unlikely media sensation. Some people even try to portray her as some kind of tragic figure.
They're crazy. Yeah.
And then you've got Detective Rossi. She's got this grim detachment about the whole thing. It really shows that she understands the true tragedy of what happened, the human cost that gets lost in all the media hype.
Yeah. Rossi's detachment speaks volumes about how she sees the reality of the situation, as opposed to the sensationalized version the public gets. The fact that people could view the killer as a tragic figure really says a lot about our fascination with fame, even when it's tied to something horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And the fashion shows, they eventually start up again, but they're described as bolder, edgier, forever tainted. It's like the industry itself was shaken by what happened. Like there's this acknowledgement that the glamour and the beauty might be hiding something much darker.
It's almost like they can't escape the shadow of what happened.
Yeah.
And then there's that final detail, that package with the scrap of fabric and the twisted seam. It's so unsettling. It leaves you wondering, is it a threat, a twisted form of thanks, maybe? Whatever it is, it definitely suggests that the killers need to be seen to make a statement might not be over. This case, it wasn't just about catching a criminal. It was about confronting this disturbing reflection of a culture that's obsessed with image.
For sure. That final package is loaded with symbolism. The twisted seam, it could represent the killer's own distorted view of beauty and recognition, like a signature or maybe a chilling hint that the story isn't really over. It leaves you, the listener, with this unsettling question. Can that need for attention, that need to be seen, ever really be satisfied, especially after it's been expressed in such a violent way. It's a question with no easy answers.
So, thinking about everything we've discussed today, what do you think this investigation tells us about ambition, about the human desire for recognition, and the potential for darkness to exist even in the most glamorous of settings? This whole Couture Killer case really forces us to consider the price that people can pay in an industry that's so focused on image and the devastating impact of feeling invisible.
That final image of Detective Rossi, sitting in the front row, she's described as both a cop and a cautionary tale. It really drives home the lasting impact of this investigation. The runway, which used to be a symbol of beauty and aspiration, is now seen as a potential danger zone, a battlefield where these unseen struggles can have deadly consequences. It's a sobering thought.
And that final package, that twisted seam, it really stays with you. Was it a threat or some kind of twisted acknowledgement from the killer? What does that tell us about their mindset, their understanding of Detective Rossi? It leaves you pondering the cyclical nature of obsessions like that. It's like, even after all that's happened, the need to be seen, to have an impact, it might still be there.
Absolutely. This investigation into the Couture Killer, it gives us a glimpse into a world that most of us only see from afar. It shows us the unexpected darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. We hope this exploration has given you some new insights, maybe even challenged some of your assumptions. Don't forget to share your thoughts and theories with us after listening, and be sure to rate and follow the True Detectives podcast for more real-life stories of detectives and their incredible investigations.
Until next time.
Stay curious.
And keep those detective senses sharp.
We'll see you then.
Bye.